perhaps where more people were educated than this one because, I mean, no offense to the other drafts, but I'm telling you, every time I came up, and I got the last pick in the draft, the first round, and every time I came up, I would have a target group of players, and boom, 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 they would be the next 2 or 3 guys to go off the list, and it was fun. But anyways, we'll talk about that. BJ Rudell's going to join us here. I sent him our draft. We'll talk a little bit about his thoughts, looking at what may went down there on draft night, but who to start and sit and all of that for tonight and this week coming up. If you want to win your league every Thursday, 1:30 p.m., BJ Rudell's here. We do some fantasy football for winners. So sit tight on the phones. Hit us up. Facebook.com/thesportsfix. Tweet with us at thesportsfixCLE. Email us, thesportsfix@AOL.com. And I'm going to go to the phones, to the hotline. BJ Rudell on here now. Let's do some fantasy football from the author of Fantasy Football for Winners. BJ, how you doing this afternoon? Kickoff afternoon.
Great here. Oh, man, I've had 2 straight nights of fantasy football dreams. No joke. And last night I dreamt there was a shootout between the Seahawks and the Packers. So anyone out there with the Seahawks defense, just brace yourself. It'll be a sign of what's to come, I think. Seahawks have about 5 or 6 really tough games on the schedule. If they can withstand the Packers at home, I think they could be an elite defense all year.
Yeah, tonight's a good one. We were talking about that earlier, both from, like you said, fantasy and in the real football aspect, a good one to kick off the season here tonight. And you heard me as I was setting the stage here to bring you on the air. I'm not joking. I'm not exaggerating. If I could show you my board that I was working off of for the draft, I'm telling you, I said, you know what? Every year it gets a little more like this because obviously the listeners are hearing the same things, and I don't talk to you privately and go, hey man, what do I need to know? Let's not tell these guys on the air. I'm that's not fair. I'm doing my research just like you do yours, but
Very
you can see that.
That's right.
But you could see it in our draft because I'm not joking. Every time, and I think it's just had more preparation from most people in the draft because every time I came up, I'm telling you, everybody, it was like they all would go in order. I go, are you serious, man? Wow. 1, 2, 3, boom, just came off my board.
Wow.
And you could tell, and a lot of them were names that we talked about, and I'd go, well, They obviously had the same notes that I had because we talked to the same guy. So look what you did. You put me at a competitive disadvantage with these fellas right off the bat.
You should start a second radio show and just take it underground.
It's a secret radio show, only for me, But I sent you, I sent you the draft before we, only for me. Before we roll on, what were your thoughts looking at our draft the other night? Was there anything, just regardless of who did it, that you went wow, or that you scratched your head, or anything like that?
I'll give you a few head scratchers and a few wow picks. The head scratchers, and again, I'm biased, right? I've been following this stuff all preseason. I have opinions. I'm biased because of the things that I learn, and it doesn't mean that I'm going to be right. So I'll couch it with that. I've been wrong enough times, and you keep bringing me on, which I appreciate. But time will tell whether or not I'm right. But for those of you keeping notes at home, taking tabs, these are the ones I think were just really rough picks. None of them from you, J-Rock, to be honest. But Ben Tate in the 3rd round, yikes. Tate is an injury risk, and he's a guy who's never had to be the man before. And when he has, he's had trouble getting into the end zone from the 5 and in. That was one of the knocks on him earlier in his career, and he's just a health risk. To take a guy like that in the 3rd round, when Larry Fitzgerald was around, Andre Ellington, Keenan Allen, guys like that, it's a huge risk. I think Darren Sproles in the 5th round is a head-scratcher. This is a guy who's 31 years old. He's not going to do in Philadelphia what he did in New Orleans in 2010, 11, 12. He's a guy on the downside of his career. He might get about 8 touches a game. To take a 5th rounder on a guy like that, maybe that team was desperate for a running back, but at that point, grab some other guys and be just as desperate in the 9th round and take someone with the same kind of upside. And then finally, Maurice Jones-Drew in the 6th round. I thought that was a very bold pick. If it works out, power to him.
That was me.
But actually, that was you.
That was me.
Oh.
I did take MJD. I do remember that.
That was
yes.
you. I see that. Yeah, I see that here. All right. Well, you are represented then, J-Rock, on this. You know what? I started going through it. I wasn't even looking at
take a chance. I knew I did. I knew I took a chance, but he's come up big the last few years when people have written him off. And I said, you know what? I'm going to take a flyer here on MJD in the middle of this thing.
And as I said, I couched it actually pretty fairly without even realizing it was you. I said, if it pays off, great. The risk with Maurice Jones-Drew is that you've got Darren McFadden. As long as he's healthy, he's going to be stealing carries, and the team's probably going to be playing from behind more often than not. So the question becomes, just like Maurice Jones-Drew on the tail end of his time in Jacksonville, was rushing the ball sometimes 20 times for 100 yards and no scores. You start getting used to that after a while. And Jones-Drew is a guy who can pile up yards, but touchdowns, I think, are going to be few and far between. But I could be wrong on that. On the plus side, guys taking Ahmad Bradshaw and Devontae Freeman in the 12th round, I thought were steals. Mark Ingram in the 10th round is fantastic. J-Rock, you had Justin Hunter in the 10th round. I thought that was brilliant. Here's a guy who could be the biggest, touchdown scorer in Tennessee this season. Kendall Wright is a terrific number one receiver, but Hunter may be the one stealing touchdowns. So to get a guy like that in the 10th round was fantastic. And Carlos Hyde for you in the 9th round, brilliant. I don't think Frank Gore is going to go more than 12 games this season. He's 31. He's slowing down. And I think San Francisco at a certain point is going to turn to their future. And finally, Mike Evans in the 9th round, and then Lance Dunbar in the 15th round. Everyone should keep an eye on Lance Dunbar, especially if people are in leagues with deep benches. DeMarco Murray has a history of getting nicked up, not playing a full complement of games during the season. Lance Dunbar is the number 2. Joseph Randall is the number 3. But Dunbar supposedly is going to be involved in the offense on day 1. And will be heavily involved, will be a 20-touch guy if anything happens to Murray. And in that offense, you're looking at a very, very high-end running back if Dunbar ever gets a chance to show his stuff.
Sounds good, my man. I mean, do you anything tickle your fancy there as who you feel may have done the best job looking at it before the season starts? And in no way am I looking for you to say me at all, because I'm digging what I did, but I'm waiting to see how it plays out first,
Sure. No doubt. Team Hunter had a pretty solid first 4 rounds till he got to Cam Newton in the 5th, and that's where I started to look a different way at it.
Do you know who that is, by the way? Are you a pro wrestling fan at all?
As a kid, I was.
Oh no, he's actually the top star of TNA Impact Wrestling, which is on every Wednesday night on Spike TV at 9:00. He's the top bad guy of Impact Wrestling, but that's whose team that is.
And I'll take that back then. I think he has a brilliant draft. I think everything he does is fantastic, and I wouldn't change a thing.
No, but I did. He came off with a strong one, man. He definitely came off pretty strong, man. I looked at his draft, and I thought Beavers. I thought his team came off all right. Yeah.
I think Fort Bragg Browns was pretty tremendous. I wouldn't have taken Aaron Rodgers in the first round, but to come in with Julio Jones, Andre Ellington, who was it in the next round? I'm trying Reggie Wayne, and then and I'm losing it right here, and then Sim Green. I thought that was a really powerful. Suddenly, you're looking at terrific running back, receiver, quarterback, and I was pretty impressed. Went a little early with defense, but I was pretty impressed with that team as well.
Charles Morgan, I believe that's his team. There you go, buddy. So
right on.
It'll be interesting to see. Now we're gonna go ahead and start playing this thing out, and I'm ready, man. And the league's tweaked now. I'm telling you, I think that come the end of this season, it's going to be a lot more competitive because of some of those changes, like simply adding a second prize for the losers bracket, I guess you would call it. This way, every team that is not one of the top 6 teams still has a prize to play for the entire rest of the season. You could be 0-15, and you're still going to make the losers bracket, and you could still win and lose every regular season game. So the opportunity to keep playing all the way to the end is there. Hopefully that just stops those weeks where people don't fill out their rosters and leave the bye weeks, because last year that was the biggest problem, is we had 3 weeks in a row where the number 1 seed practically just had 3 victories handed to them because they happened to play 3 guys who stopped filling out their rosters.
Yeah, that's rough. And we talked about that at the end of the season. What can be done, and I may be getting ahead of ourselves on this one, but it could also be good to look at what point does somebody just kind of forfeit their team if that ever happens. If the league kind of goes and says, this person's quitting on us and kind of compromising the integrity of the league, maybe we should get together and just let the computer pick the players and keep it fair, and fun for everybody. But again, I'm getting ahead of myself. Right now, everyone's in it, and the expectation is everyone's going to stay in it.
That's right. It's going to be a lot of fun, and it starts tonight. So for everybody, no matter what league you're playing in, you're all sitting here. You're looking at your Thursday night. You're going, who can I play out of tonight's game? Man, here comes weekend number 1. So throughout this entire weekend, let's go through. Why don't you give me who you think are your sits, your starts, your sleepers, perhaps outside of the box of what everybody's telling people to do?
Sure. I've been down on Steven Jackson all preseason. He hasn't played. He's been hurting. I do think that he has a chance in this first game to be a starter. And he's one of my favorite players going back 10 years. And it's been a shame to see, he had trouble last year staying healthy. I don't think he's going to make it through this season at his age with his injury history. But I see him as a terrific start against the Saints at home. The Falcons have so much to prove after last year's debacle. When Julio Jones went down, Roddy White was hurt constantly. The team just, it wasn't good for the city. And I think this game, it's a perfect matchup, against a rival like the Saints. And I think Steven Jackson has one of those great throwback games. I think Zach Ertz is a guy to keep in mind for this week, going up against the Jaguars D. It could be a little suspect. I've heard some people say they're better than people think. I'll say I'll believe it when I see it. And Zach Ertz is one of those sneaky guys who technically has been a timeshare tight end, but also behind the scenes. Oh, what's that?
Oh, I was just saying, that's my guy, man. I'm with you. Zach
Ertz. That's your guy,
man.
Yeah. And I thought about it actually a few weeks ago, looking ahead at week 1, and who are the guys I would want to start. And I thought, Zach Ertz is one of those sneaky guys who could be a top 5, top 6 tight end every week if he gets the chance. And I think in Philly, he's going to get that chance. I think Tom Brady, and this may be more obvious, but I think Tom Brady will be a top 3 or top 4 quarterback this week. He owns the Dolphins throughout his career. Mm-hmm. Dolphins secondary is just pretty rough. Dolphins in general are not that good. And I think Tom Brady, and the big question there is who of the 8 receivers who are fantasy relevant are going to be catching balls. And everyone has to keep an eye on Gronkowski's health and how much he actually plays. I think the Bears make for a very intriguing, streaming defense. I'm never going to recommend the Bears defense at all, but if you're hurting for defenses, I think the Bears at home against the Bills, where you have E.J. Manuel, who just seems like a quarterback who isn't going to make it in this league. We'll see what happens, but he just doesn't look like he has what it takes. And I think the Bears will own that team. I don't think Fred Jackson and C.J. Spiller combined are going to be able to do enough to really put a dent in the Bears, whose offense is probably as good as any offense in the league, with Alshon Jeffrey and Brandon Marshall and Matt Forte. And finally, I'm going to go against the grain and say Doug Martin, coming back from a year lost to injury against the Panthers front 7 that's very fearsome. A lot of people don't want to play the Panthers. I think Doug Martin rekindles his former glory and reasserts himself as a top 10 running back this week.
Let me ask you, looking at some of these other, one that intrigues me, do you have a feeling on Derek Carr? Because the Jets, I think, are going to struggle all season against other teams' quarterbacks. And, obviously, your preseason is what it is. But that third preseason game is considered the dress rehearsal. And he looked pretty good against Seattle. Now, again, this is preseason. But what do you think, Derek Carr against the Jets? Do you think he could be one of the big quarterbacks this weekend?
I think if you're choosing between Geno Smith, and Derek Carr, maybe you take a chance on Derek Carr. If this were Week 8 and Derek Carr had 7 games under his belt, and he looked pretty good, he looked like a 200-yard, 2-touchdown kind of quarterback, I would say, yeah, roll the dice with Carr. This is